Hello and welcome to Rotary and Serving Our Community. My name is Wade Nomura, and with us today we have a very special guest, Paul Netzel, who is going to be the incoming chair of the Rotary Foundation. Paul, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Wade.
And thanks for joining us, by the way.
I'm delighted to be here.
I know with your busy schedule, we had to squeeze you in here, but we sure appreciate
You
that.
bet. Thank you so much.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal background, your professional background.
Yeah, okay. I started, actually I was born and raised in the Seattle-Tacoma area, state of Washington, and a place called Browns Point, right on Puget Sound, and was there until high school. We moved to Yakima, Washington, which was in the central part of the state of Washington, where I graduated from high school there, and then went to college in Chicago on the south side, Hyde Park, actually near the University of Chicago. I studied in a program that was one of the only schools in the country at that time that was training professionals to go into nonprofit management and nonprofit work. And that's where I met my wife, Diane, as a matter of fact. She was from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and went to school there also, obviously. And as it turned out, we got married in our last quarter in school, and then eventually came to Los Angeles. And after graduating, and for the most part, we've stayed in Los Angeles all that time since. And
Great.
yeah.
So what drew you to Los Angeles after graduating there?
Went to work with the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. It's in the top 5 largest YMCAs in the world. It was back then and still is today. And so it was a remarkable experience working with young people and people of all ages, of course, but my particular interest was in the youth work at that time, and so that was where I spent about 22 years. Wow.
And you dabbled a little bit in politics, from what I recall.
Well, I did, as a matter of fact, yes, and actually it's sort of a little bit of a longer story in terms of how I got into it. I was executive director of the Culver City YMCA, called the Culver Palms YMCA, and for a number of years. And then I went for about 5-6 years after we moved to Los Angeles, and then I was transferred to the downtown metropolitan operation. Eventually I became executive vice president, where I oversaw all of the fundraising and fund development activities of the association. And while I was there in that position, it was easier for me to be involved in some political activities and so forth. So I was invited to serve as to be a candidate for the Board of Education, and during the latter half of the 70s, and I was elected and served a full term on the Board of Education, serving as its president one term. And as I was looking at re-ing up, if you will, for a second term, people came and suggested, well, maybe you ought to consider being a candidate for the City Council. So I thought it over, and my wife and I, we decided that would be a great opportunity, and so I did run as a candidate and was elected, and wound up serving 2 terms as mayor of the city during the time that I was serving on the City Council. And so my life is one of the underbellies of my particular adult life has been service. I've had a great deal of belief that we have an obligation as citizens to return to our community and to organizations or whatever we can through serving. And I thought, I have no interest in a long-term political career, but I feel, well, if I can offer and contribute something to the city and to the community, I would do that. So that was one of the areas that I did spend about 12 years in those roles.
That's great. Sounds like a lifelong destination for you.
Well, it was certainly it was a magnificent. I was in the process actually of thinking of going into a master's program at the time that I was originally asked to consider running for the Board of Education. And so as it turned out, my master's turned out to be public service, and in an extraordinarily unique situation, and 12 years of that, and so I figured that was my master's degree. I learned so much from that experience.
That is great.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your Rotary experience and how you got into Rotary.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one too. When I was 26 years old, I was asked to be the executive director of the Culver City YMCA, Culver Palms YMCA. And within virtually a month and a half of my coming into the position on the job, the Rotary clubs or the service clubs in the community contacted me and asked if I'd be willing to consider joining their club. And that's a pretty standard procedure in many, many communities, of course. And so I said, sure, I'd love to have a chance to get acquainted with the different clubs. So I attended about 5 different organizations' meetings. And the long and the short of it was Rotary, hands down, was the organization that just stood out to me for a whole variety of reasons, one of which was just simply that they were the movers and shakers. They were the leaders of the community. And a number of them were on the board of directors of the YMCA. And so I had that opportunity also to see them in action in a different circle. So that was my first exposure to Rotary.
Got it. And which club is that?
Then it was the Culver City Rotary Club.
Culver City, okay.
And about 4.5 years, I was going through the chairs and very likely would have been president within a year or two after. But I was transferred to the downtown Metropolitan YMCA office, the corporate headquarters of the YMCA, and I immediately was able to join the Rotary Club of Los Angeles, and so I was have been a member of that ever since.
Got it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your Rotary moment. Have you ever had a Rotary moment, something you could pin back on?
Yeah,
say,
yeah, I've had. Actually, I would say a number of Rotary moments, and you know, but there were 2 that were most memorable to me, and the first one, believe it or not, was when I sponsored a member. The first time I'd been in Rotary maybe 10 years, and I was in the Rotary Club of Los Angeles at the time, obviously, and sponsoring a member gave me such pride that I had no idea the significance of, I felt like I was really contributing to the livelihood, to the lifeblood of Rotary and to our club in particular. But another, what I would consider from a programmatic standpoint in Rotary experience was going to India and working on a polio corrective surgery project where we had, our district was involved in a Rotary 3H grant, then they were called, about $250,000, and every year we were sending a delegation of 10 Rotary leaders. I was the governor at the time for our district, went to Pune, Mumbai and Pune, India, respectively, and we did about 750 surgeries.
Wow.
And there was a moment in time when, as we were outside of a wooden building that was serving as the medical center for the children that were coming in for the surgery, which, by the way, is about a 20 to 30 minute surgical procedure on certain tendons in their legs. And then following, they put it in their legs in a cast.
Right.
And after maybe 45 days and then rehabilitation and so forth, the kids generally were able to run, walk, and be just like normal kids, and it was a blessing for them. Anyway, but I had one young boy that I saw come on his hands and knees because he was unable to walk or do anything but just crawl. He was a crawler, along with his mother and father, obviously, that were right behind him, and he came crawling up to me and came to the front where my shoes were and kissed the top of my shoe. And it was just an amazing experience for me. Time just seemed to stop, and chills just went up and down my spine. And then the boy crawled back about 5 or 6 paces back, and the mother came forward, and she got down on her hands and knees, and she too kissed the top of my shoe. She got up, moved back. The father came forward, did the same thing.
Wow.
And it was an amazing moment. And the Rotarian next to me leaned over and he said, this is their way of saying thank you for changing their lives and for changing his life forever. And so I asked the Indian Rotarian to let them know that I was so moved by their gesture of appreciation that I said, I promise you that when I go back to the United States and talk with Rotarians, that I will tell this story wherever I can, because it means a lot. So please know that you have done as much for us Rotarians as perhaps we maybe have done for your son and your family.
Wow, that is a moving story.
Yeah.
That would change lives.
Yeah.
I would say, now that you are in the foundation, incoming chair of the foundation,
Yes.
was that kind of because of what you just talked about? seeing how the foundation works, changes lives, changing lives, things like that. Was that one of the reasons why you focused on this specific passion area?
Well, Rotary opens doors when you, at various levels of when you come into Rotary, and if not immediately, then somewhere in your journey through Rotary levels of activity. And I always wanted to reach out and just be involved to do something. And there were many opportunities of leadership opportunities that I was provided and so forth. But a lot of what we did in Rotary, at least in my earlier years in particular, all tended to circle around the Rotary Foundation related activities in one way or another. So it just seemed, just went through a progression. I went the path of becoming district governor, which opened up, first of all, I was a past president at that point of the Rotary Club of Los Angeles, then a past district governor, and that opens the door to higher levels of exposure. And so I was eventually elected to serve on the board of directors of Rotary International. And the foundation, being a trustee of the foundation at the time, never was really on the radar screen in my book. I figured, you know, well, that's always past presidents and others that get into that role. But so I served my time, if you will, on the board of directors. And immediately following that, then I was asked to start taking on some leadership roles in specific major foundation-related activities. And over a period of 3-4 years, I wound up, then I was elected to the board of trustees of the foundation. And so, to me, it is sort of the heartbeat and the center of Rotary's, the world of Rotary activities. Obviously, everything emanates from the Rotarians individually and from the clubs. But in terms of the entity that is sort of the catalyst to help provide miracles, particularly through the funding resources and stuff, the foundation is it. So yeah, it was just sort of a love at first sight, but it just kind of materialized in a whole variety of different ways.
And that is great. It's a good way to explain it too. The Rotary Foundation, being on the board of trustees, is a 3-year term.
4-year term, actually.
4-year term.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
4-year term. That being the longest one in the organization as far as for volunteers. Do you see that as a large benefit for being able to create the changes that are needed for the foundation?
Yeah, I do. Well, not just the changes for the foundation, but to really carry forward issues and priorities that need to be accomplished. And in fact, in my opinion, serving on the board of directors for a 2-year term, you really don't get a chance. One more year would be the ideal, in my opinion, on the board of directors, because you can be advocate for a particular issue or priority, and you can work on it, but it takes really 2 to 3 years before you see it. In the case of the foundation, the 4-year term is really the optimum, because it takes 1 year to 2 years to really begin to learn quite a bit that needs to be learned about what it is to be a trustee, and there are different things that we do as trustees, but the bottom line is it's really in years 3 and 4 that you really can begin to advance these things, and certainly I would never have had the opportunity to be the chairman of the trustees if I were only on a couple-year term, let's say,
and that's
in my opinion.
Probably true. As far as membership, then, how many board of trustees are members on the board?
Yeah, there are 15, and 4 of whom are past presidents, typically the immediate past line of presidents that serve, and the other 11 are ultimately elected in increments of 3 or, well, generally 3 a year by the board of directors. And the thing that distinguishes the board of directors from the foundation trustees, the board of directors are elected or selected by zones so that the entire Rotary world is represented on the board of directors, whereas many areas of the world do not have what they would consider their quote-unquote representative from on the trustees. However, none of the trustees are representatives of their geographic area. They just happen to come from that area, but they're global in their thinking and working, and their decision-making needs to be done truly on a global basis.
Having it set up and established that way, where they're non-specific to geographical areas, is it an awareness that the trustees have to have as far as looking into different cultures, different areas of the world for specific needs?
Yeah, you know, it really is interesting, because I've been to probably every continent, first of all, short of Antarctica. But every place has their own cultural interests and needs and particular issues that they're addressing. And And the trustees do have an opportunity to travel to different locations around the world. One of the things is that every trustee attends at least one, if not two, institutes somewhere in the world. Right. And part of our job is to go and to speak, to motivate, but also to go out into the field and monitor and look at projects and assess them and help provide feedback and learn from that. And we bring back those experiences and knowledge. We may have a trustee from Brazil, for instance, right. But unless you've been to Brazil and really can understand the culture and the environment and the economic hardships or the political issues that they're addressing there, you really, in isolation, if you haven't been there to experience that, you really don't have the ability to appreciate it the way it is. And it's really important because fundraising is a key part of the job of trustees, and the culture and the philosophies of and the protocols of raising funds around the world are quite different in different places around the world from what we might know in North America.
Could definitely see that,
yeah.
That happening. Of course, you have a lot of developing countries also that would be, I would say, limited as far as resources financially, but definitely have the need.
Oh, you might be surprised.
you
might be surprised,
you're
as a matter of fact. Yeah. Yes.
Well, that is good. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you, I just happen to know the Philippines. I won't name names, but we have a lot of strong leaders in the Philippines, Rotary leaders, of course. And I would say that the Arch Clump Society, which is a very prestigious level of giving at $250,000 or more. Right. I may be mistaken, but I think that we only had maybe 2 or 3 what we call AKS members up until about 6 months ago. And just in that last period of time, I think we've had now at least 3, maybe 4, with more coming into the pipeline. Wow. And so it's but there are still tremendous economic hardships throughout the country. And but what Rotary is able to do and connect, and this is a great illustration of it in my opinion, is that the leaders, the people with capacity, may or may not belong to Rotary, but they're connected in the Rotary network, or vice versa. And so Rotarians are able to draw upon, many of them are fellow Rotarians, and to talk about, well, have you ever thought about making a gift in this range that will allow us to do just that much more, whatever it might be, and it can be anything across the waterfront in terms of all the opportunities of how the dollars could be used.
Understood. That does make sense. I have noticed in doing international projects myself that there is also oftentimes a substantial distance between those that have and those that need in areas like that.
Yes.
How would you, as the foundation on the trustees, try to create that area where you can assist those that are very low when you have people that have the sources or the means in the same country?
Well, actually, the truth of the matter is, some might disagree with me, but it's really not the trustees that are driving that. This is grassroots. The beautiful thing about Rotary, the strength of Rotary, is the grassroots nature. Individual Rotarians, Rotary clubs, Rotary districts, multiple clubs going together to work together on joint projects and so forth. They are the ones on the ground, and Rotary has, without a doubt, perhaps the most efficient, effective, and powerful network of word of mouth, if you will, and connectors, whether it be in the Philippines or in India or Pakistan or Latin America, Africa, you name it, with Rotarians all around the world. That network is powerful and active and alive and well. And so constantly new projects are emerging every year, as you know from your experiences. And the trustees really try to provide the broad framework, and we have what we call the 6 areas of focus, and as opposed to 20 areas of focus. And the concept of 6 areas of focus, to be broad-based but still focused enough in strategic areas of need and issues that particularly if they were addressed properly, and if every human being in the world had their housing and their medical care, their education, they were literate, and other and water, clean water and sanitation, access to those things, all of those in their totality, we would have a world almost free of poverty, undoubtedly, and probably a far more peaceful world. So, but it isn't the trustees laying on what these are the things that need to be done. It's the Rotarians on the ground networking with other Rotarians around the world to say, look, we've got this need, and will you work with us on it? Sure, we'll work with you on it. And so we provide both the framework, the point of accountability, stewardship, if you will, of the dollars, a mechanism where the dollars can be awarded out for worthy projects and so forth. And then we also provide coordination of overall fundraising on a worldwide, but also on a local basis.
Right.
Yeah, we have a network on that. So it's a partnership, if you will, is another way to look at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I see the trustees as part of that organizing effort. So
Without a doubt.
bring all this together.
It's a major responsibility they have.
It is, because I know for a fact when you got, 34,000 clubs
Yeah.
all wanting to go a separate way,
Yeah, exactly.
bringing that together in
Precisely.
unity.
Yeah, precisely.
As far as a trustee and you as the chair,
Yeah.
could you share with us a little bit about how you see the trustees working together, what the focus would be, and how you identify specific needs, things like that, in the world?
Well, we have a lot of committees. When I say a lot of committees, maybe a half dozen that are specifically targeting particular areas of emphasis, if you will, not in the context of the areas of focus per se, but issues that need to be attended to. And so the various committees that meet and address various issues. Programs committee would be one illustration. The fund development committee is another one.
Okay.
That investment committee is another one. And so they are addressing issues that will come to and making recommendations to the trustees. But many of the issues that emerge within the committees come from the grassroots in terms of things that are identified as needs or issues that are raised, and they say, trustees or to Rotary International,
Right.
Can you help us on these? So it's a combination of the management and the administration and oversight of the work that needs to be done, and I mentioned them earlier in what they are, but a lot of them also come up through the grassroots mechanisms. And a lot of what we do centers around training and communication, and so we'll also have groups that work on the training designs and setting up the infrastructure and the opportunities, such as an institute like this.
Right.
We'll have the training of the incoming governors and the governor's nominee. Or we'll have all of the Rotary Foundation chairs for each of the Rotary districts come to that. Well, some of that is driven in part by work of the committees at Rotary International, then filters down through the system.
Oh, I see.
Okay?
Okay, perfect. As far as staffing, because I know the trustees have specifics, but you have administrative efforts also with that.
Mm-hmm.
What is your staff? Do you have a guesstimate on number that you have at Evanston or?
653?
653. Are they specific to the foundation?
No.
Okay.
No, probably I would believe about 170 are
Okay.
approximately today.
Okay.
And of the other numbers, many of them dealing with international offices and so forth.
That
yeah.
is true.
Right.
Now, how many? Do you have any idea how many international offices you have that you work through? Because most of those are all foundation
Well, I
based.
think we have 8 international offices around the world,
Okay.
and so each has, they're an extension of world headquarters in Evanston, Illinois, and so they have staff and they come together periodically to get coordinates and all that sort of stuff. But
So I'm going to guess it's the, if there's a project or something like that going out there, you want to do an evaluation as a trustee or the board to see those, how would the efforts be? In other words, if there's a project specific, example in Mexico, a water project, that seemed to be fascinating, that would work, how would you find out about it or get to hear about those?
Well, number one, there's a formal grant application process, and it's a fairly involved process for sure, with some very specific criterion laid out for that, and a local Rotary team, if you will, the Rotarians, work on online application and submit it. And let's say a grant of $100,000 is awarded, and before it's awarded at a grant level, particularly at that level or higher, we will have what we call cadre member, somebody that has a Rotarian with expertise in a particular area. They may actually go out and to the location and meet with the Rotary club or clubs that are initiating the grant or participants in the grant, to be sure that the community is properly engaged the way that and it'll vary from project to project and so forth. And so we actually have an on-site process that goes on prior to the approval of a grant. When a grant is approved and then it is funded and is carried out at the other end of the process, we may very well have a cadre member go back out and look at it and certify that indeed the mission was accomplished. And sustainability is an important part of the process, meaning that long after the Rotarians have left that particular project, that it will continue to be active, and it will have engaged local community or schools, if it's related to a school or whatever. Long after we're gone, it'll be self-sustaining, if you will.
Right, no, that's good. We actually had a couple of programs on the cadre. Outstanding program, by the way. Those guys, they do a lot.
Yes, they do indeed.
They do quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now tell me this, oftentimes Rotarians, the ones that haven't been involved with, I would say, the fundraising component of that, in your words, tell us why the foundation becomes important as a tool for Rotary.
Well, it's maybe the analogy, one analogy would be it's the gas that drives the automobile of carrying out whatever it is that we're doing in Rotary, particularly in terms of service and outreach and so forth. And without the resources, we would be immensely limited in what we're able to do, quite obviously. And actually the funds that are raised by Rotarians, both in the area where the project may emanate from and will be delivered, as well as the Rotarians in other places in the world who are going to participate and support the program. Right. It gives them a much greater sense of ownership in what it is that's being done, and so it creates a absolutely irreplaceable sense of this is a project that I can connect with, and it would be just like I experienced their Rotary moments many times over.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. It looks to me like we're going to be in good hands for the next 4 years under your leadership. We really appreciate that. Experience you brought is immense, and especially with the passion. I'm sure you'll find a lot of the trustees also carry that same passion for service. Lastly, I want to also extend my hello to your wife, Diane.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry she couldn't make it today,
Okay.
but also Rotarian, outstanding Rotarian also.
And to Roxanne as well, as a matter of fact.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.
And thank you very much for
You
joining
bet.
us.
Thank you,
We
Wade.
appreciate that.
Okay,
Thank you.
You bet.
And with that, everybody, thank you very much. Take a look at the Rotary Foundation. See all the great that it does. And with gentlemen like Paul Netzel, changing lives, changing the world. That is one area where we could be very proud of. With that, thank you. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Great. Good job.